The morning sun was just beginning to peek through the windows of Riverside Recovery Center when Dr. Lisa Park walked through the main entrance for her first day. She had been looking forward to this moment for weeks, but now that it was here, butterflies danced in her stomach. This wasn't just any job for her. Working with people who had been through difficult times felt like her calling, especially since she understood what it meant to struggle. Lisa had her own story of pain. 3 years ago, a terrible car accident had changed everything for her. The physical injuries had healed mostly, but the emotional wounds still made her careful about letting people get too close. She knew what it felt like to be afraid, to build walls around yourself just to feel safe. Maybe that's why she wanted to help others who were fighting similar battles. The recovery center was different from regular hospitals. It felt warmer somehow, with soft colors on the walls and comfortable furniture that didn't look too medical. Plants sat in every corner, and natural light filled most of the rooms. This place was designed to help people heal not just their bodies, but their hearts too. "Good morning, Dr. Park," called out Nancy, the head nurse, as Lisa signed in at the front desk, ready to meet your first patient. Lisa nodded, trying to look more confident than she felt. Nancy handed her a thick file folder. "His name is David Chen. He's been with us for about 3 months now. Former Army medic, served overseas for 6 years. Really good at his job, saved a lot of lives." Lisa opened the file as they walked down the hallway. David's photo showed a man in his early 30s with kind eyes and a gentle smile. But Nancy's next words made her pause. "The thing is," Nancy continued, lowering her voice, "David has a hard time with physical contact. Really hard time. We've had 4 different therapists try to work with him, and none of them could make much progress. He just won't let anyone touch him, not even for basic exercises." Lisa studied the notes in the file. David had been injured during a mission where he was treating wounded civilians. Something terrible had happened, but the details were mostly blacked out in his medical records. Whatever it was, it had left him unable to do the work he loved most, helping people with his hands. "Has anyone tried talking to him about why he feels this way?" Lisa asked. Nancy shrugged. "The other therapists tried, but he just shuts down, speaks to everyone like they're strangers, even after working with them for weeks. Very polite, very professional, but it's like he's built a wall around himself that nobody can get through." They stopped outside room 205. Through the small window, Lisa could see a man sitting in a chair by the far wall, as far from the door as possible. He was reading a book, but his posture was tense, alert, like he was ready to run if he needed to. Lisa took a deep breath. "What's the worst that could happen, right?" Nancy gave her an encouraging smile. "Good luck, Dr. Park. If anyone can reach him, I think it might be you." Lisa knocked gently on the door and waited for permission before entering. David looked up from his book, and she could see him quickly assess her, noting her height, her movements, how close she stood to the door. It was the behavior of someone who had learned to always be on guard. "Good morning," Lisa said, keeping her voice calm and steady. "I'm Dr. Lisa Park. I'll be working with you on your physical therapy." David closed his book and stood up, but he stayed behind his chair like it was a shield. "Another therapist," he said, and his voice was flat, emotionless. "How long do you think you'll last?" The question might have sounded rude, but Lisa could hear the tiredness in his voice. This wasn't attitude, this was exhaustion. He was tired of people trying to help him and then giving up. "I don't know," Lisa answered honestly, "but I'm not here to last. I'm here to help you get better, however long that takes." Something flickered in David's eyes, surprise maybe. He had probably expected her to make promises about quick results or breakthroughs. Lisa pulled up a chair and sat down, making sure to keep plenty of space between them. "Before we start any exercises, I'd like to understand what you need. What would make you feel comfortable during our sessions?" David stared at her for a long moment. "You want to know what I need?" "Yes. I need people to understand that I can't be touched. I know that sounds strange for someone in physical therapy, but that's how it is." His voice was still flat, but Lisa could hear something else underneath. Pain, maybe even shame. "Okay," Lisa said simply. "So no touching. What else?" David blinked, clearly not expecting her to accept his condition so easily. That's it. Mostly. I can do exercises on my own. I can use equipment. I just can't have people putting their hands on me." "Can you tell me why?" Lisa asked gently. David's jaw tightened. "Does it matter why? It might help me understand how to work with you better, but you don't have to tell me if you don't want to." For several minutes they sat in silence. Lisa didn't push or try to fill the quiet with meaningless chatter. She just waited, letting David decide what he wanted to share. Finally, he spoke. I used to help people with my hands, it was what I was good at. But something happened, and now," he stopped, shaking his head, "now I feel like my touch might hurt people instead of helping them." Lisa felt her heart squeeze with understanding. She knew what it was like to feel like your body had betrayed you, to be afraid of the very thing that used to bring you joy. "I think I understand," she said softly. David looked at her sharply. "Do you? Maybe not exactly, but I know what it's like to be afraid of something that used to feel natural. After my accident, I was terrified of being in cars. Even as a passenger, it took me 2 years before I could drive again without having panic attacks." David studied her face, looking for signs that she was just saying what she thought he wanted to hear. But Lisa's eyes were honest, open. She wasn't trying to fix him or convince him he was wrong to feel the way he did. "So what do we do?" David asked. "How do you do physical therapy with someone who can't be touched?" Lisa smiled for the first time since entering the room. "We get creative. There are lots of ways to work on strength and mobility without me having to put my hands on you. We can use resistance bands, balance equipment, guided movements. The important thing is that you feel safe." David's shoulders relaxed slightly. The other therapists didn't like that answer. "Well, I'm not the other therapists." Lisa stood up and moved to the small table where David's exercise equipment was kept. As she reached for a resistance band, she noticed David tense up again. "You mustn't touch me, human," he said quietly, but firmly. The way he said human was strange, like he was creating distance, not just physically, but emotionally too. Like he was reminding himself that she was just another person who would eventually leave. "I won't," Lisa promised, holding up the resistance band. "But I can show you some exercises that might help with your shoulder mobility. Would that be okay?" David nodded slowly. Lisa demonstrated the first exercise, moving slowly so David could see exactly what to do. She explained how the movement would help his injured shoulder regain strength, and why it was important for his overall recovery. That, as David tried the exercise, Lisa noticed how careful he was with his movements. Not just careful because of his injury, but careful like he was afraid of taking up too much space, of being too present in the room. "That's good," Lisa encouraged. "How does that feel?" "It feels ... double quotes." David paused, seeming surprised. "It feels okay. It doesn't hurt." "That's great. Pain isn't always necessary for healing." They worked through several exercises, with Lisa always staying at least arm's length away. But as the session continued, something interesting happened. When Lisa moved to demonstrate a new exercise, David instinctively leaned forward to see better. When she asked him to try a movement that required better balance, he naturally stepped closer to where she was standing. It was like his body wanted to trust her, even while his mind was still building walls. Near the end of their session, Lisa was putting away the equipment when she stumbled slightly. Her old injury sometimes made her left leg weak, and she had to catch herself against the table. Without thinking, David moved toward her, his hand reaching out as if to steady her. For just a moment, his fingers brushed against her arm. The contact lasted only a second before David jerked his hand back like he'd been burned. "You mustn't touch me, human," he said again, but this time his voice was shaking. Lisa looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the confusion in his eyes. He had reached out to help her instinctively, the way a healer would, but then his fear had kicked in. "It's okay," Lisa said gently. "Thank you for trying to help me." David stared at her, searching her face for signs of anger or disgust, but Lisa just looked grateful, not hurt or afraid. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "I know, but you did it because you wanted to help. That's who you are, David, under all that fear. You're still someone who cares about helping people." David's eyes filled with tears that he quickly blinked away. "I should go. Session's over. Same time tomorrow." Lisa asked. David paused at the door. "You really want to come back?" "Yes, if you want me to." David gave a small nod and left the room, but Lisa noticed that he didn't slam the door behind him, like the note said he usually did. He closed it gently, quietly. Lisa sat back down in her chair and thought about what had just happened. David had reached out to help her, even though touch terrified him. 2 weeks had passed since Lisa's first meeting with David, and their sessions had become the highlight of her day. Every morning at 9 o'clock, she would knock on his door and wait for his quiet come in before entering. It had become their routine, and routines seemed to make David feel safer. Today was different though. When Lisa arrived at room 205, David was already standing by the window, looking out at the garden below. Usually, he sat in his chair as far from the door as possible, but this morning he seemed more relaxed. "Good morning, David," Lisa said, setting down her small bag of equipment. "Morning," he replied, turning from the window. I was watching the birds. There's a family of robins that built a nest in that oak tree. The babies are learning to fly. Lisa joined him at the window, keeping her usual respectful distance. Sure enough, there were 3 small robins hopping from branch to branch while their parents watched nervously from nearby. They look scared, Lisa observed. Yeah, David said softly. First time leaving the nest is always terrifying, but they have to do it if they want to really live. Lisa glanced at David, wondering if he was talking about more than just birds. Over the past 2 weeks, she had learned to listen carefully to everything he said. David rarely spoke directly about his feelings, but he often revealed them in other ways. Ready for today's exercises? Lisa asked. David nodded and moved to his usual spot. Lisa had developed a whole new approach to physical therapy just for him. Instead of the usual hands-on guidance, she used resistance bands, balance boards, and carefully positioned mirrors so David could see his own movements and correct them. Let's start with the shoulder work, Lisa said, demonstrating the movement herself. Remember, slow and controlled. Your shoulder is getting stronger every day. As David began the exercise, Lisa noticed something she had been seeing more often lately. He was watching her carefully, not just to copy the movements, but like he was trying to figure something out. Dr. Park, David said after finishing his first set, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. You favor your left side when you walk, and sometimes you grip things tighter than you need to. Is that from your accident?" Lisa paused, surprised by his observation. "You notice a lot." "Old habit. When you're a medic, you learn to see when people are in pain, even when they're trying to hide it." Lisa sat down in her chair, considering how much to share. "Yes, it's from the accident. My left leg was crushed pretty badly. Some days are better than others." David stopped his exercise and looked at her with genuine concern. "Are you getting treatment for it?" "I was, for a while. But I got tired of people trying to fix me. Sometimes I think they cared more about making me normal again than about how I actually felt." David set down his resistance band and really looked at her. "That must have been frustrating." It was. They meant well, but they didn't understand that healing isn't always about going back to exactly how you were before. Sometimes it's about learning to live with the changes. "Yes," David said quietly. "Exactly." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, both understanding something important about each other. "Is that why you work with people like me?" David asked. "Because you understand what it's like?" Lisa nodded. "Partly, but also because I've learned that healing happens better when you don't feel alone in it." David picked up his resistance band again, but this time he moved his chair slightly, closer to where Lisa was sitting. Not close enough to touch, but closer than he had ever been before. "Tell me about before," Lisa said gently as David continued his exercises. "What was it like being a medic?" David's movements slowed, but he didn't stop exercising. "It was everything. To me, I was good at it, you know. I had steady hands and I could stay calm when everything around me was chaos. People trusted me with their pain. That sounds like an incredible gift." "I thought so too. I remember this one time, we were in a small village and there was a little girl who had gotten hurt. She was so scared, crying for her mother. But when I started treating her wound, she stopped crying and just looked at me with these big, trusting eyes." Her mother couldn't speak English, but she took my hands and pressed them to her heart. You know, like she was saying thank you. David's voice had become softer, more open than Lisa had ever heard it. "That must have felt amazing," Lisa said. "It did. For 6 years, that's what I did. I helped people. I healed them. My hands were instruments of healing." David's voice changed, becoming harder, and then everything changed. Lisa waited, not pushing but letting David know she was listening. "There was an attack," David continued, his exercise movements becoming more mechanical. "I was treating civilians, mostly women and children who had gotten caught in the crossfire. I was trying to save this little boy who reminded me of my nephew back home, but I couldn't. My hands, the same hands that had saved so many people, they couldn't save him." David stopped exercising completely and stared down at his hands. "After that, every time I tried to touch someone to help them, all I could think about was that little boy. I started shaking during procedures. I couldn't focus. My commanding officer said I was having a breakdown, that I needed to come home." "That sounds like a normal response to something terrible," Lisa said gently. "Maybe, but now, when I think about touching someone, even to help them, I'm terrified I'll hurt them instead. What if my hands bring pain instead of healing? What if I make things worse?" Lisa felt her heart breaking for him. She understood fear, but David's fear was wrapped up with his entire sense of who he was. "David," she said carefully, "do you remember What happened 2 weeks ago when I stumbled? David looked up, his eyes guarded. I shouldn't have touched you, but what happened when you did? David frowned, thinking, I helped steady you. Exactly. Your instinct was to help, and that's exactly what you did. You didn't hurt me, you helped me. But that was just instinct. I wasn't thinking. Lisa leaned forward slightly. Maybe that's the point. Maybe when you stop thinking and just let yourself be who you really are, your hands remember how to heal. David stared at her for a long moment. You really believe that? I do, but more importantly, what do you believe? David went back to his exercises, but Lisa could see he was thinking hard about what she had said, that as they worked through the rest of the session. Lisa noticed small changes in David's behavior. He asked her questions about her own healing process. He offered to adjust the blinds when he noticed the sun was getting in her eyes. When she mentioned being tired, he suggested they take a short break. These were small things, but they showed that David was starting to care about someone else's well-being again. He was beginning to remember what it felt like to want to help. Near the end of their session, Lisa was demonstrating a new balance exercise when her leg gave out slightly. She caught herself quickly, but David was already moving toward her. You mustn't touch me, human, he said, but his voice was different this time, less harsh, more like he was reminding himself of a rule he wasn't sure he wanted to follow anymore. His hand hovered near her arm, not quite touching but ready to help, if she needed it. I'm okay, Lisa said, but she didn't move away from his outstretched hand. For several seconds, they stood like that, his hand inches from her arm, both of them aware of the space between them and the possibility of closing it. Finally, David lowered his hand, but he didn't step back to his usual distance. At the same time tomorrow, Lisa asked as she gathered her things. Yes, David said, and Dr. Park. Yes. Thank you for listening, for not trying to force me to be someone I'm not ready to be yet. Lisa smiled. Thank you for trusting me with your story. As Lisa left David's room, she realized something important was happening. David was still afraid of physical contact, but he was no longer afraid of emotional contact. He was letting her see who he really was underneath all that fear. And maybe more importantly, he was starting to remember who he wanted to be. The next morning, Lisa found a small origami crane on her desk with a note. For the doctor who understands that healing takes time. Thank you for your patience. David. Lisa smiled and carefully placed the crane on her windowsill where she could see it throughout the day. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures of trust were actually the biggest steps forward. David was learning to let someone care about him again, and Lisa was learning that helping someone heal could heal your own heart too. 1 month had passed since Lisa first walked into David's room, and their relationship had grown in ways neither of them had expected. What started as professional therapy sessions had become something deeper, a friendship built on understanding and shared pain. That it was a rainy Thursday evening, and the recovery center was quieter than usual. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving only the night shift to keep watch. Lisa had stayed late to catch up on paperwork, but she found herself thinking about David instead of focusing on her reports. Their sessions had been going so well. David was making real progress with his physical healing, and more importantly, he seemed to be finding pieces of himself that he thought were lost forever. He smiled now during their sessions, asked questions about her life, and even made gentle jokes. The walls he had built around himself were slowly coming down, but Lisa was starting to worry about something else. Somewhere along the way, her feelings for David had grown beyond professional care. She found herself looking forward to their sessions not just as a therapist, but as a woman who was falling for a man who couldn't be touched. The sound of footsteps in the hallway broke her from her thoughts. She looked up to see David walking past her office, moving slowly like he was in pain. David, she called out softly. What are you doing here so late? He stopped and turned, and Lisa could see immediately that something was wrong. His face was pale and his hands were shaking slightly. I couldn't sleep, he said, his voice tight. Nightmares again. I thought maybe walking around would help. Lisa set down her pen and really looked at him. Bad one. David nodded, not trusting his voice. Want to talk about it? Lisa asked. David hesitated, then slowly walked into her office. He didn't sit down, just stood near the doorway like he was ready to run if he needed to. It was the same dream I always have, he said quietly, but tonight it was different. Tonight you were there. Lisa felt her heart skip. I was there. In the dream, I was trying to save that little boy again. But this time, you were there too. And you got hurt because I couldn't protect you. My hands, they were covered in blood, and I couldn't help either. Of you. David's voice broke on the last words, and Lisa could see tears in his eyes. David, it was just a dream. You didn't hurt anyone. But what if I do? David's voice was getting louder, more desperate. What if I let myself get close to you and then I fail you the way I failed him? What if my hands bring you pain instead of healing? Lisa stood up slowly, wanting to comfort him but knowing she had to be careful. Your hands have never brought me anything but help, she said gently. Remember when you caught me that first day? When you adjusted the blinds so the sun wouldn't hurt my eyes? When you made that beautiful origami crane? Those were acts of kindness, David. That's who you are. David shook his head violently. No, you don't understand. I'm broken, Lisa, really broken. And broken people hurt the people they care about. The admission hung in the air between them. David had just confessed that he cared about her, but he had done it while explaining why he had to stay away. We're all broken in some way, Lisa said softly. That doesn't mean we can't care about each other. It does for me, David said, and his voice was filled with so much pain that Lisa felt it in her own chest. I can't risk hurting you. Lisa took a small step toward him, and David immediately tensed. You mustn't touch me, human, he whispered, but his voice was shaking. I'm not just human to you anymore, am I? Lisa asked gently. And you're not just a patient to me. David closed his eyes, and a tear slipped down his cheek. That's exactly the problem. For several long minutes they stood there in the quiet office, the weight of unspoken feelings heavy between them. The rain continued to tap against the windows, and the soft hum of the building's ventilation system was the only other sound. Finally, David opened his eyes and looked directly at Lisa. I think I'm falling in love with you, he said, his voice barely audible. And that terrifies me more than any nightmare. Lisa felt her breath catch. He had hoped, maybe even suspected, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel suddenly real and impossibly complicated. David, she whispered. No, he said quickly. Don't say anything, please. I shouldn't have told you that. It's not fair to either of us. Why isn't it fair? Because what kind of love is it if I can't even hold your hand? What kind of relationship could we have if I can't touch you without falling apart? You deserve someone whole, someone who can give you everything you need. Lisa felt tears starting in her own eyes. What if I don't need everything? What if I just need you? David stared at her, and for a moment, Lisa thought he might take a step toward her. But then his expression hardened, and she could see him rebuilding his walls in real time. No, he said firmly. I won't do that to you. I won't trap you in a relationship with someone who can't even give you basic human affection. That's not your choice to make for me, Lisa said, her own voice getting stronger. Maybe I've been hurt too. Maybe I understand what it's like to be afraid of intimacy. Maybe we could figure it out together. And what if we can't? What if I hurt you? What if I have an episode and I push you away so hard that you get injured? What if my nightmares get worse and I can't handle being close to anyone? David's voice was rising, and Lisa could see the panic starting to take hold of him. Then we'll deal with it together, she said simply. No, David shouted, and then immediately looked shocked at his own outburst. No, he said again, quieter. I can't risk it. I won't risk it. Lisa felt something break inside her chest. She had opened her heart to him, and he was choosing fear over love. She understood his fear, but it still hurt. So what happens now? She asked quietly. David wiped his eyes and straightened his shoulders, and Lisa could see him putting his professional mask back on. Now I request a new therapist. Someone who can help me without complications. David, please don't do this. It's already done. I'll talk to Nancy tomorrow. David turned to leave, but Lisa called out to him one more time. You know what I think, she said, and there was a new strength in her voice. I think you're not afraid of hurting me. I think you're afraid of being happy. I think you're afraid that if you let yourself love me and be loved by me, you might have to forgive yourself for what happened overseas, and that scares you more than anything. David stopped walking, his back still to her. I think, Lisa continued, that you've been punishing yourself for so long that you don't know how to stop. But healing isn't just about fixing what's broken, David. Sometimes it's about learning to live with the scars and finding love anyway. David's shoulders shook, and Lisa could tell he was crying. You mustn't touch me, human, he whispered, but this time it sounded like a plea rather than a warning. Then don't think of me as human, Lisa said softly. Think of me as someone who sees your heart and loves it anyway. Someone who doesn't need you to be perfect to be worthy of love. David stood there for another long moment, and Lisa held her breath, hoping he might turn around, might choose love over fear, but then he walked out of her office without another word, leaving Lisa alone with her tears and the sound of rain against the windows. The next morning, Nancy knocked on Lisa's office door with a concerned expression. David Chen has requested a new therapist, she said gently. He said there were compatibility issues. Are you okay? Lisa looked out her window at the oak tree where the baby robins had been learning to fly. The nest was empty now. The birds had either learned to soar or fallen trying. I'm fine, Lisa said, though her heart was breaking. Sometimes people aren't ready to heal, even when they want to. But deep down, Lisa knew this wasn't over. Some connections are too strong to break with just fear. And sometimes, the people who run the farthest are the ones who need love the most. 3 days had passed since David walked out of Lisa's office, and the recovery center felt different, quieter somehow, like something important was missing. Lisa tried to focus on her other patients, but she found herself glancing toward room 205 every time she walked down that hallway. Nancy had assigned David to Dr. Rodriguez, an experienced therapist who specialized in trauma cases. He was good at his job, professional and kind, but Lisa couldn't help wondering how David was handling the change. You look tired, said Tom, one of the other therapists, as they sat in the break room during lunch. Everything okay? Lisa stirred her coffee and tried to smile. Just adjusting to my new schedule. Tom nodded, but Lisa could tell he wasn't convinced. The truth was, she hadn't been sleeping well. Every night she replayed that conversation with David, wondering if she could have said something different, something that might have made him stay. The sound of her pager beeping interrupted her thoughts. Emergency in room 205. Lisa's blood ran cold. She ran down the hallway, her heart pounding. When she reached David's room, she could hear Dr. Rodriguez's calm voice trying to talk someone through what sounded like a panic attack. David, I need you to focus on my voice. You're safe. You're in the recovery center. No one is going to hurt you. Lisa peered through the small window in the door and saw David pressed against the far wall, his eyes wild with fear. Dr. Rodriguez was trying to approach him slowly, but every time he got close, David would flinch away. Don't touch me, David was saying over and over. You don't understand. I can't. I can single quotes T. Lisa's training kicked in. She gently knocked on the door and entered the room. Dr. Rodriguez, may I? She asked quietly. Dr. Rodriguez looked relieved. He's been asking for you. I've tried everything I know, but he won't let me near him. Lisa nodded and slowly approached David, but not too close. She could see the sweat on his forehead and the way his hands were shaking. David, she said softly, it's Lisa. Can you hear me? David's eyes found hers, and some of the panic seemed to fade. Lisa, you're really here? I'm here. Can you tell me what happened? David's breathing was still fast and shallow. Dr. Rodriguez was trying to help with my shoulder exercises. He reached out to adjust my position, and I just I couldn't handle it. I started thinking about blood and screaming and that little boy, and I couldn't breathe. Lisa's heart broke seeing him like this. The progress he had made over the past month seemed to have disappeared. It's okay, she said gently. Panic attacks feel scary, but they can't actually hurt you. Let's try to slow down your breathing. I can't, David gasped. I keep seeing his face. That little boy, and now I'm seeing your face too, and I'm so scared I'm going to hurt you. Lisa took a deep breath and made a decision that went against every rule she had been taught about professional boundaries. David, look at me. Really look at me. Do I look hurt? David focused on her face, his breathing still rapid but slightly slower. No, he whispered. Do I look afraid of you? You should be. But am I? David studied her face carefully. No, you never look afraid of me. That's because I'm not afraid of you. I've never been afraid of you, David. Not even now. Dr. Rodriguez cleared his throat softly. Maybe I should give you two some space. Lisa nodded gratefully, and Dr. Rodriguez quietly left the room. Why did you come? David asked, his voice still shaky. Because you needed me, Lisa said simply. When someone you care about is in pain, you show up. That's what love does. David's eyes filled with tears. I told Dr. Rodriguez I didn't want a new therapist. I told him I wanted you back, but I was too scared to ask. Then when he tried to touch me, everything just fell apart. Lisa felt her own eyes getting wet. I've been having the nightmares every night since I left your office. But now they're different. Now I dream that I'm pushing you away and you disappear forever, and I wake up feeling like I can't breathe. I'm not going anywhere, Lisa said, firmly. But what if I hurt you? What if my fear makes me do something terrible? Lisa looked at him for a long moment, and then she did something that surprised both of them. She sat down on the floor, cross-legged, about 6 feet away from where David was standing. What are you doing? David asked. I'm showing you that I trust you, Lisa said. I'm making myself vulnerable on purpose. If you were really dangerous, If you were really someone who hurt people, would I do this? David stared at her, and slowly, very slowly, he slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor too. This is crazy, he whispered. Maybe, but sometimes crazy is the only thing that makes sense. They sat in silence for several minutes, just breathing in the same space. Lisa could see David's panic gradually fading, replaced by something else, exhaustion, maybe, or relief. I missed you, David said finally. I missed you too. I tried to convince myself that having a different therapist was better, safer, but the truth is, I don't want safe anymore. I want you. Lisa felt her heart skip. David, I know all the reasons why it's complicated. I know I'm broken and scared and probably not good relationship material. But Lisa, these past 3 days without you have been harder than any nightmare I've ever had. You're not broken, Lisa said firmly. You're healing. And healing is messy and scary, and sometimes it means taking risks. David looked down at his hands. What if I can't give you what you need? What if I never get better with the touching thing? What if you do get better? What if we figure it out together? What if we stop asking what if and start asking what if? Now, David was quiet for a long time, thinking, you mustn't touch me, human, he said finally, but his voice was different, softer, almost like he was testing the words instead of hiding behind them. Then don't think of me as human, Lisa replied, the same way she had in her office 3 nights ago. Think of me as someone who loves you exactly as you are right now. David looked up at her, and for the first time since she had known him, his eyes weren't guarded. They were open, vulnerable, full of hope and fear and love, all mixed together. I love you too, he whispered. Lisa felt tears spilling down her cheeks. So what do we do now? David was quiet for another moment, and then he did something that shocked both of them. He slowly extended his hand toward her, palm up, about halfway between where they were sitting. I don't know if I can touch you yet, he said, his voice trembling, but maybe you could touch me. Lisa stared at his outstretched hand, understanding what he was offering. This wasn't just about physical contact. This was David choosing trust over fear, choosing love over safety. Are you sure? She asked. No, David said honestly, I'm terrified, but I'm more terrified of losing you. Very slowly, Lisa reached out and placed her fingertips gently on his palm. David flinched slightly but didn't pull away. His hand was warm and slightly rough, and Lisa could feel it trembling under her touch. How does that feel? She whispered. David closed his eyes, and a tear rolled down his cheek. It feels like coming home, he said. They stayed like that for several minutes, Lisa's fingers resting lightly on David's palm, both of them breathing carefully and marveling at this small miracle of connection. We're going to figure this out, Lisa said softly. Together? David asked. Together. When they finally pulled their hands apart, both of them were crying and smiling at the same time. It was just a small touch, but it felt like everything had changed. 6 months later, the sun was setting over the small clinic that Lisa and David had opened together. The sign outside read Healing Hearts Recovery Center, and it had become a place where people with trauma could find understanding and hope. Lisa was sitting at her desk, reviewing patient files, when she heard familiar footsteps in the hallway. She smiled without even looking up. After all this time, she could recognize David's walk anywhere. Long day? David asked, appearing in her doorway with 2 cups of tea. The best kind of long day, Lisa replied, accepting the warm cup gratefully. How did your session with Mrs. Chen go? David settled into the chair across from her desk. She held my hand today. First time she's let anyone touch her since the accident. She cried for 10 minutes, but then she said it felt good to remember that not all touch brings pain. Lisa smiled, watching David's face light up as he talked about their patient's progress. It still amazed her how much he had changed over the past months. The guarded, frightened man she had first met was still there sometimes, but now he was balanced by someone confident and hopeful. What about you? Lisa asked. How did it feel for you? David considered the question seriously. Even now, he was always careful to check in with his own feelings about physical contact. It was part of his healing process. Good, he said finally. Really good. There was a moment where I felt the old fear starting up, but then I remembered what you taught me about breathing through it, and I thought about how much Mrs. Chen needed that connection. You've become an amazing therapist, Lisa said, and she meant it. David's combination of medical knowledge and personal experience with trauma made him uniquely qualified to help others. We make a good team, David replied, and his eyes were warm as he looked at her. They did make a good team. Their clinic had become known throughout the region for its innovative approach to trauma therapy. Instead of traditional methods that sometimes pushed patients too hard too fast, they focused on building trust and letting people heal at their own pace. Speaking of teams, David said, and Lisa noticed he seemed a little nervous. There's something I wanted to talk to you about. What's on your mind? David set down his tea and looked directly at her. We've been working together for 6 months. Now we've been whatever we are ... for 6 months, and I think it's time we talked about what we want this to be. Lisa felt her heart speed up slightly. They had been taking their relationship slowly, very slowly. After that first breakthrough moment when she touched his hand, they had spent weeks just getting comfortable with small gestures, a hand on a shoulder during a difficult day, fingers brushing when they passed papers to each other, a brief hug when one of their patients had a major breakthrough. For most couples, it might have seemed like nothing, but for David and Lisa, each small touch was a victory, a step toward healing and trust. What do you want it to be? Lisa asked gently. David took a deep breath. I want us to be real, not just colleagues who care about each other, not just two broken people helping each other heal. I want us to be partners, in work, in life, in everything. Lisa felt tears prick her eyes. David ... I know I'm not easy to love, David continued quickly. I know I still have bad days where I can't handle being touched. I know I wake up from nightmares sometimes and need space. I know I'm probably always going to be a little bit broken. We're all broken, Lisa said softly. That's what makes us human. David smiled at that. You're right. But what I'm trying to say is that I don't want to let fear make decisions for me anymore. I spent so many years being afraid of hurting people that I forgot how good it feels to love someone. Lisa stood up and walked around her desk to where David was sitting. He looked up at her and she could see hope and nervousness and love all mixed together in his expression. You mustn't touch me, human, David said. But now the phrase had become something completely different. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was their private joke, their way of acknowledging how far they had come. Then don't think of me as human, Lisa replied, saying the words that had become their special response. Think of me as someone who chooses you every day. David stood up too, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then, very slowly, David reached out and took both of Lisa's hands in his. His hands were steady now, warm and strong. These were the hands that had saved lives overseas, that had been afraid to touch anyone for so long, that now helped people heal every day at their clinic. Lisa Park, David said, and his voice was clear and sure. Will you marry me? Lisa gasped, staring down at their joined hands and then back up at David's face. She could see how much courage this question had taken, how much trust. Yes, she whispered, and then louder, yes, absolutely yes. David's face broke into the biggest smile Lisa had ever seen from him. He pulled her closer, and she came willingly, wrapping her arms around him in a hug that felt like coming home. They stood there in their clinic, holding each other as the last light of day streamed through the windows. It wasn't a perfect moment. David was still careful about where he placed his hands, and Lisa was mindful of his comfort level. But it was their moment, full of understanding and patience and love. I love you, David murmured against her hair. I love you too, Lisa replied. All of you. The healed parts and the healing parts, and the parts that are still figuring things out. They pulled back to look at each other, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. So what now? Lisa asked. Now we keep doing what we've been doing, David said. We keep healing, we keep helping others heal. We keep choosing love over fear, every single day. Even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days. Lisa nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Love wasn't just about the easy moments. It was about showing up for each other through panic attacks and nightmares and bad days. It was about being patient when progress felt slow and celebrating the small victories along the way. There's one more thing, David said, looking slightly embarrassed. What? I don't actually have a ring yet. I was so nervous about asking that I forgot about the practical parts. Lisa laughed, a sound full of joy and relief. David, after everything we've been through, do you really think I care about a ring? Well, when you put it like that ... Besides, Lisa said, grinning, I think we should pick it out together. We're pretty good at figuring things out as a team. David squeezed her hands gently. The best team. As they locked up the clinic and walked to their cars, Lisa thought about how much had changed since that first day she walked into room 205. Back then, she had been a therapist trying to help a patient. Now she was a woman who had found her partner, her purpose, and her home all in the same person. David stopped next to his car and looked back at the clinic sign. You know what I realized today? What Mrs. Chen wasn't the only one who learned that not all touch brings pain. I learned that too. I learned that when you love someone and they love you back, touch can be healing. It can be home. Lisa felt her heart swell with happiness, ready to go home. David smiled and reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. With you, always. And as they drove away from the clinic they had built together toward the life they were creating, one careful, loving step at a time. Both of them knew that they had found something rare and precious. They had found a love that was built on understanding, strengthened by shared struggle, and deep enough to last a lifetime. Sometimes the best love stories aren't about people who complete each other. Sometimes they're about people who choose to heal together, who turn their scars into wisdom and their pain into purpose. David and Lisa had found that kind of love, and they were never letting it go.